Hello and welcome back. I told you I would have a podcast 2 days in a row, and here we are. I was wrong about PSA part 2, and today we are going to talk about the document nailed to the cross in the PSA view. Yesterday we talked about the document nailed to the cross in the Christus Victor view, which was the document nailed to the cross for the first 1100 years of church history. And it was, of course, Satan's proof of record that he owned the nations, the record of sins that proved he owned all humanity. So after 1100 years of believing that this was the document nailed to the cross, it changed in 1098. So basically the early 12th century. So in this video, we're going to talk about why that document changed and who changed it. So it was changed by the Archbishop of Canterbury. His name was Anselm. Probably many of you guessed that one. And what happened was that Anselm lived during medieval feudalism. And in medieval feudalism, a manor lord had vassals, and these vassals were subject to him. And the manor lord demanded strict loyalty from his vassals. Now, if one vassal decided to rebel against the manor lord, and he instigated other vassals of the manor lord to join him in this rebellion, that did not give the instigator rebel vassal any legitimate claim of authority over the other rebel vassals. They're all still subject to the manor lord, and they're all still under the authority of the manor lord. So Anselm came to the text with the presupposition that his culture and the Bible just mirrored each other. It's a very common, normal thing to do. And so he assumed that because Satan was a created being of Yahweh and humans are a created being of Yahweh, then just because Satan rebelled, Satan as a created being of God rebelled against him and then instigated humanity to join him in that rebellion. But this did not mean for Anselm that Satan had any legitimate claim over humanity. They're both creations of God. They're both subject to God. And so any claim Satan might make over humanity is just a lie. It's a lie to make humanity think that they're in bondage to him, but they're really not. And so for Anselm, his main presupposition that he basically starts out this theory with is that Satan has no legitimate claim over the nations because one rebel vassal didn't have any legitimate claim over other rebel vassals in medieval feudalism. Now, of course, the problem is that the Bible says Satan had inherited the nations. Now, in Anselm's defense, Anselm's Bible did not say that. Anselm's Bible was the Latin Vulgate, which had been the official translation of the church since the 4th century. And Deuteronomy 32:8, the verse in which it says that the sons of God inherited the nations, it says sons of Israel. There's various theories on why this that Jerome, he's the translator of the Vulgate, would have come across a Hebrew translation that said this in the 4th century, but we do know that the Septuagint, the 1st century Greek used by the Berean Christians, the 1st century Christians, and quoted by Matthew, Paul, and possibly Jesus, but quoted extensively. The Septuagint is quoted extensively in the New Testament, is all had sons of God. And the Dead Sea Scrolls have angels in the Deuteronomy 32:8. So we know, or that might be reversed. I always get them mixed up. But the point is that the sons of God was understood to be angels in the 1st century. That's culturally, semantically historic. And that's culturally and theologically historic that was the first century understanding. And Jerome, Anselm's Bible did not have that translation. So in that respect, he was not aware that he was directly contradicting Scripture when he wrote his book, which, by the way, is called Cur Deus Homo, Why God Became a Man. Anselm wrote this book because pagans were hesitant to convert to Christianity, and he wanted to eliminate any obstacles they may have had. So the entire book is written with, the highest goals in mind. But he did something that is very common, very easy for all of us to do. He brought his culture to the text. And he did not do this intentionally. This is called eisegesis. And so often we are taught that eisegesis is something a person does intentionally. They want the Bible to say, Jesus will make me wealthy. And so then they'll find verses that seem to support the concept that Jesus wants you to be rich. And then they will say, see, the Bible proves my preconceived assumption. But that's not the definition of eisegesis. Eisegesis means to lead into the text. You led into the text with your presuppositions, biases, cultural background, whatever. It does not mean that you did this intentionally. You can do this unintentionally. You can do it unconsciously. It just means that that's what happened. You led in to the text. Exegesis, on the other hand, is when we draw out from the text. We draw out the author's intended meaning, what he intended to say in his culture, using the words semantically, theologically, the way they were used in his milieu. So that's exegesis. So to do that in a document that is 2,000 years old and in a collective society, when we are an individualistic society, you have to consciously set aside your preconceived notions, your cultural background. We're all products of our culture. It's normal. So it's the opposite of the way we're taught it. We have to consciously set aside our biases in order to perform exegesis. And if we don't consciously and intentionally set aside our culture and discover what was meant 2,000 years ago, then we're going to commit eisegesis unintentionally all the time. And this is basically what Anselm did. So if Anselm removes the Satan inherited the nation's walls of this building, then what is going to happen is the building is going to collapse. The roof is going to cave in. You can't have a roof without walls. So the Christus Victor walls come collapsing. Now, of course, he needs a building, and so he has to replace the walls so that he can replace the roof. So what does he replace the walls with? Now, before we jump into that, Anselm knew what he was doing. Okay, he did not do this accidentally. He literally wrote that Satan cannot have a legitimate claim over humanity and that this was his deception. And even though he knows that the Bible heavily implies that the document nailed to the cross was the devil's handwriting, the devil's decree, the devil's proof of ownership, he knows it. He literally wrote that he knew that, but that the church had gotten it wrong, and that he was going to fix it. So are you ready to see what walls he installed? The walls that hold up the roof of PSA? It's going to be familiar. The demands of divine justice. That is what Anselm replaced the walls with.
Any biblically adequate atonement theory must include the notion of propitiation. That is to say, the appeasement of God's just wrath against sin.
He lived the life you couldn't live. He bore your sin. And then all the judgment that God's justice demanded be poured out on you, he absorbed it.
This is divine wrath unleashed against sin. And what makes this so unique is the one hanging on the cross is sinless.
Greatest peril facing every person in every ethnic group in every place on earth and at every time in history is the righteous wrath of God against guilty sinners, leading to everlasting suffering unless God himself rescues us from his own judgment.
He satisfied the righteous anger of God toward us. He placated the holy vengeance of God toward us, so that the Father is now propitiated.
The Christus victor, Satan inherited the nation walls. He replaced them with walls that are the demands of divine justice must be satisfied. Now for Anselm, the demands of divine justice was that honor, God's injured honor, was satisfied. So in medieval feudalism, if you committed disloyalty against the manor lord, you were in his debt. You incurred a debt. And for Anselm, any lack of obedience to God incurs a debt against him. And this debt is injurious to God's honor, who deserves 100% loyalty and obedience. And so in feudalism, there were two ways to make up for incurring a debt against the manor lord. Two ways for a vassal to do this. One, he could be punished. This could be public stocks, floggings, jail time, execution, that type of thing. The other thing he could do is compensate the manor lord for the injury to his honor. So let's say the debt that he incurred was worth $10,000. So the vassal is now $10,000 in debt to the manor lord. He could repay the manor lord or compensate the manor lord by giving him $10,000 worth of wheat, $10,000 worth of animals, $10,000 worth of servitude, working X amount of years in addition to whatever he's supposed to be working for him, to make up that $10,000. Now, if he were to overcompensate the manor lord, let's say he gave the manor lord $60,000 worth of animals, or $60,000 worth of wheat, or $60,000 worth of servitude, then he has now overcompensated the manor lord. Well, now the ball changes court, and it is the manor lord that now owes a reward to the vassal because the vassal has so overcompensated for him. So now Anselm, in probably one of the most beautiful lines in Cur Deus Homo, says that Jesus's blood, one drop of Jesus's blood, is so precious that it compensates for all humanity's sins for all time. And yet Jesus shed a ton of blood. And so Jesus far overcompensated God for the injury done to God's honor. But Anselm says, well, what kind of reward can God give Jesus? Jesus already has everything. And so the reward was salvation for humanity. So it's beautiful and it's logical and it's loving, but it's just unbiblical. It's not, He didn't get it. He didn't derive this presupposition. He didn't extrapolate this presupposition from the text. He extrapolated it from his culture. And in order to extrapolate it, I mean, and the whole thing is that he removed what was historic Christianity. He removed historical Christianity and replaced it with something extremely modern. I mean, 12th centuries that's modern compared to the first century. So, you know, it's not historical. So that now some people don't care. They're not, it doesn't have to be, an evangelical doctrine doesn't have to be historical for them to be right. It just has to be exegetical. And we will get into that in other videos. We're going to talk about the literal, grammatical, historical, and historical, again, is theologically, culturally, and semantically. We will get into all of that for PSA. In this one, we're just talking about what the document is that was nailed to the cross in the PSA view. And for Anselm, that was the demands of divine justice must be satisfied. And the roof is Jesus satisfied the demands of divine justice by compensating God for his injured honor. Obviously, that is not quite PSA. So we're not at PSA yet. There have been modifications to Anselm's building that we will get into in future videos. But that should give you a crash course in Anselm and what he did. The book is called Critias Homo. It might be available for free online, but I know that it is at most libraries. It is also in the public domain. The English translation is from the 1920s, and it was pretty understandable. I will, however, quote with the sources, the parts that we talked about in this video in the comments or in the description box. I'm not sure where. Maybe in the comments. Maybe I'll do individual quotes in the comments, and so that we can get a discussion going on the various things that he said. So, yeah, hope you found that interesting and very edifying. And if you ever need to defend why PSA is not historical, we got 2 more episodes to tell you even how we got to PSA, but I mean, that's pretty good right there because PSA shares the same presupposition, the same document nailed to the cross. It's just the roof went through some modifications. Maybe there was a hailstorm, and no, we'll get into why the roof was changed and who changed it, and if they knew they were changing it, because all of that is extremely interesting, at least to me, and hopefully to you. So, all right, I think that is your one concept for today's video. So I'm JC Lamont, by the way. This is my podcast channel thingy. Like, subscribe, whatever. I'm releasing a video every Monday through Thursday this month, and then after that, forever, hopefully, it will be Mondays and Thursdays. But there is still one more thing that I was wrong about, PSA, and we will get into that one tomorrow. And then I think next week is when we start getting into the exegesis behind this doctrine. Basically, removing the walls, removing the presuppositions, and looking at the hermeneutic stud used to support those walls. So we will look at the walls in the Christus Victor view, and we will look at the walls in the penal substitution view, and we will see which hermeneutic they use, because presumably they can't both be true. In other words, they can't both. There wasn't more than one document nailed to the cross to begin with. I don't think anyone has ever said that one. And but one is going to use a literal, grammatical, historical hermeneutic, and one is not. And we will look and see which is which. I will keep you in suspense as if you didn't already know what I was going to say. Okay, so until then, keep standing firm.